Hello and welcome to a deprogrammed interview. I'm your host, Keri Smith. I'm excited to be back. It's been a while since we've had an interview. Thank you guys for your patience during all the time that we took off during my surgery recovery. And this is a person who, this interview today, I'm very excited about this. I discovered this person when I was doing all that bed rest. And like a lot of you, if you're familiar with him, you probably found him because of the tweet storm that happened and the mobbing and the controversy. He is the founder, the co-owner of Wasson Watch Company. I would describe it, if I were telling my friend about it, from what I'm not a watch person, but it is a based Christian-owned watch company. And his name is Paul Brown. He started quite a bit of controversy when he came out on Twitter against fascists. For some reason, that was controversial. Please welcome to the program, Paul Brown. Hello, Paul.
Hi, Keri.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I got to speak with you briefly before we started. It's been a little while since this controversy. You've had a little bit of time to think and reflect on it. Before we get into that and what's happened since then, can you tell people a little bit about your watch company? I'm not a watch person. I've checked out your website. Here's what I love about it up front is that you mention your faith all over. It's such a taboo thing to do nowadays, but you talk about being a Christian and a father, and so that stood out to me. But how did you get into this? What led you to start this company?
Yeah. I've always been a little bit of an entrepreneur. Like in high school, I had a lawn service with around 20 customers. Over the years, as I've been involved in quite a lot of different things, from Marine Corps intelligence to defense intelligence to banking and nonprofits, I've started a few side businesses. But in 2018, I wanted to start something bigger. I wanted to, a lot of those side businesses, they've been nice for a little extra income, but I wanted something I could eventually do full time, to provide for my family. And so I had this, I've always loved watches, and I discovered automatic watches. I didn't know what those were before around 2017. And you may have heard of them before, but an automatic watch is a watch that is wound through the movement of your wrist. So rather than just having to be manually wound using the crown here, that's what this piece is called. There's a rotor in there that every time your wrist moves, that rotor moves and it automatically winds it. So
It
there's no
winds itself.
right, self-winding. Yes. So it's not a new technology. This is technology that's hundreds of years old. But when quartz watches, battery operated watches came on the scene and became popularized, they're way cheaper, right? I mean, you're talking about orders of magnitude cheaper, and they became very popular overnight. And of course, people love technology, so that was a new technology when it came on the scene. But there's this niche market for these automatic mechanical watches because a lot of people appreciate that, hey, it doesn't have batteries, and this is an ornate, complex piece of craftsmanship that is very unlike the quartz watches that you typically see on people's wrists today, or even the smart watches, which have become much more popular. So I started getting into those, and I realized, like, hey, this is something I love. This is something I enjoy. I have a very specific idea in mind for a kind of watch I would like to get. And even though there's a number of watches on the market similar to it, I wasn't able to find exactly what I wanted. And so I thought, I'm going to make that watch, and I'm going to see if I can, turn that into a business. So it took a long time, 3 years of product development to go from
Wow.
idea to finished prototype, and then another year before we started being able to sell and ship those to customers. So we're going on 7 years now as a company.
And who would you say are your primary client base? I've got your website here. These are beautiful watches.
Thank you.
Who would you say is primarily buying from you? Because
Yeah.
um, like I said, I don't know a lot about watches, but I knew someone in my old life in New York who was like a luxury watch salesman or something. Would you consider these luxury watches or
Yes.
okay?
Yes. The way I describe our position in the market is that this is the entry level of high-end Swiss automatic watches. So entry level, high end. What does that mean? When you think of high-end Swiss watches, like those usually start in the range of a couple $1,000 to 5 or 10,000. So most Rolex watches are going to start at around 10,000 or above, and can go all the way up into the 20s, 50s, hundred thousands of dollars. So this really is, again, entry level for that segment of the market. You've got watches though made in Japan, made in China, made in all these different places. Varying quality from like not good quality to great. But we really wanted something that was going to be accessible while also still being quality, right? Because if you just focus exclusively on affordability, well, at some point you're going to start sacrificing quality in a way
Hmm.
that to me is just, I don't, that's not what I want to put out there.
Yes, I used to sell handmade cowboy boots, luxury cowboy boots, but the handmade kind. And we had a huge neon sign that said, "What is that quote? You probably know it."
Buy
The
once, cry once.
no, no, no. That's more to the point. This one was the sweetness of low price. No, the bitterness of poor quality remains long after the sweetness of low price is forgotten.
That's more eloquent than buy once, cry once. But yes, very nice.
But I like buy once. I'm gonna write that one down. That's just
Yes,
right to the point. Okay,
buy once,
so
cry once. Yeah.
we've got all the links below if people are into watches, if they know someone who would appreciate a watch from a company like yours. You can find the links below. It's wassonwatch.com. And yeah, I think it's beautiful work. Oh, and let me put your site back up here one more time. I have one more question about it.
Yeah.
So um, there it is. Okay. So as I mentioned, you have on just right here on the homepage, you say, "We are uncompromising idealists. We never hesitate to defend our ideals of justice, truth, and the God-given value of each individual." I mean, that just jumps out at you in this day and age because we're sort of living in this post-Christian, woke, religious world. And to even see something about God on a company page. And then I was tooling around here and went to Impact, and you have this whole section here on it says, "In Matthew, Jesus said this to the Pharisees who were questioning them. He said to them, 'You shall love the Lord God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets.' And then you say, 'For this reason, we pledge to donate a portion of proceeds to God honoring and worthy causes.' And you have information there on the charity, the organization that you support. But just the fact that you would include elements or reference to your faith on your website is something I'm not used to seeing. So, what was that ever a question when you guys were forming this company that you would include that? Were you going to try? Was there ever a point where you thought we shouldn't talk about this, or yes, let's put it out there, that's who we are?
Yeah, great question. So, when I started the business in 2018, I was by myself, and I am a kind of outspoken guy. I've been very involved in work with a group called Abolish Abortion Texas, and that's something I've been very very involved with over the years. And part of that is I just see the importance of the era we're in, that there's a lot of truth that people are afraid to discuss or have been afraid to discuss, which frankly I think a lot of that is changing. I'm very grateful for. Just an interesting data point, like last year in June, I made a point of making a post every single day of that month, about Pride Month being evil
Yes.
and bad and gross and all that stuff. And looking at Pride Month this year versus last year and seeing how many companies opted out from taking these big Fortune 500 companies that had previously taken these very pro LGBTQ stances, changing like their logos, for instance, on social media. And they didn't do that this year. A lot of them didn't do it. The MLB, Major League Baseball account on X, you probably saw,
Mhm.
changed theirs for like a day, and they got so much negative feedback that they took it down. Um, but so really, I feel like regardless of all of that, before I even really knew that was going to happen, that was just my ethos. Is like I want to speak the truth. Part of my theology on this is based on what it says in Ezekiel. God is basically telling Ezekiel that he needs to speak the truth in prophecy to the people of Israel. He and God uses this analogy. He's like a watchman. If the watchman is on the wall and he sees the enemy coming, and he sounds the alarm, but the people do nothing, the blood's not on his hands, right? The watchman has done what he can. But if he sees the enemy coming and he doesn't sound the alarm, and the enemy come and they kill the people, then the blood is on his hands.
Yes.
And that's how I believe Christians should view our place in this world, at least in part. Obviously, it's not everything, but a piece of it is we have a responsibility, a God-given responsibility, to warn the people around us about what is coming, and what is coming at a base level for all human beings is you will face your maker someday, right? And I like how much there's the guy is Penn and Teller, the comedian magician duo.
Oh, I
um,
know. I
One
think
of
it's
them talks and the
men.
other one doesn't. And
Yeah.
I think Penn is the guy who talks. He's a really prominent atheist, but he's really respectful in his dialogue with Christians. I've seen some really awesome stuff from him over the years. And one of the things he said was on the topic of Christians sharing their faith. He's like, what kind of person would you have to be to believe that the people who don't believe in Jesus are going to hell and not tell them that? You know
Yes.
what I mean? Like
Right?
what kind of people are we if we believe that we have this access to the truth and we're just like, I don't want to share it with them. It's going to be awkward. They might not
Yeah.
like me. They might disagree. I mean, think of all the terrible awkward situations you could be in. Um, so so anyway, I'm being kind of long-winded about this, but I just want to kind of describe
Yeah.
where I'm coming from. And when I met my business partner Travis Rudolph in 2021, about 3 years in, so I just finished my product development. I was very open about all this, and that's one of the reasons that we partnered is because he was totally on board. He was like, "Yes, this
Yeah.
is this is the right thing to do. This is what I want to." So even though he wasn't there at the beginning, as soon as he found out about it, there wasn't any like, oh, I don't know about this, man. Maybe you could tone down that stuff. That was part of what attracted him to the business, and I've been very grateful for how he's backed me up over the years too. There've been, and he also helps to even me out a little bit because, like, you may have heard this before, that every strength kind of has a shadow weakness too.
Mhm.
Like, if I'm outspoken, and sometimes it's helpful to have someone else to bounce things off of. Like, is that really what you want to be saying? Is that really the best way to say it? You know?
Like in a marriage, it helps to have that person
Yes,
who's, "Oh, wait,
yeah,
I'm gonna help you, temper that a
absolutely,
little."
absolutely, yeah, yeah. So I think I've addressed the question, but
You have, yes, and I so appreciate that, and I find it really refreshing, and, your point about it's Penn and yes, I've heard that anecdote about him before. I don't know if I've actually heard the quote, but where he talks about, "If you thought I was gonna burn in hell, I would appreciate it if you told me,"
yeah,
to the effect of, "Why keep that from me?" So it's almost like, would you say it is loving to tell the truth,
yes,
right?
absolutely. Yes, that is a much more concise way
Yeah,
way to say
there
it.
you go.
That's what it comes down to. It's loving to tell the truth. It's not loving to not tell the truth. Another analogy I like, and not to belabor the point too much, but it's like if you saw someone driving in a car towards a cliff, you should tell them that there's a cliff ahead, even if that means you have to do it awkwardly, like wave your arms to get their attention. And maybe they look at you funny because you're like, I'm trying to drive here. Why are you distracting me? Like, because I want to save your life. And And that's the reality that we live in. And it applies to salvation, but it applies to all these other topics too: abortion and pornography and anti-Semitism and the political realities that we find ourselves in. These are all important topics.
Yes, and that's a nice segue into the controversy, the truth that you spoke that some people did not appreciate. The reason that I learned about you and about Wasson Watch Company, this tweet of yours, and I've got it here on the screen. If you don't mind, I'm just going to read it for anyone listening. But you said, "Dear Nazis, groypers, and anti-Semites, there is no room for you in MAGA, conservatism, or the Republican Party. You have shown where your loyalties lie. You chose Iran over America. Your hate for Israel is literally all that guides you. We don't need you or want you. If you are ready to come out of your delusions and come to the right side, which is also the winning side, great. We will be happy to have you. The rest of you can pound sand. You are total losers who have no power or influence here." And then you have the beautiful American flag. And this was shared on June 22nd. And describe a little bit about first of all, what led you to share this?
Yeah, let me give you some background, and
Okay.
in case you haven't noticed already, I love context. I think context is key in so many things. So really briefly, like, I've always been very opposed to anti-Semitism. I have a favorable view of Israel and Jews in general, both from a theological and political perspective that we can dive into more later. Um, and I was even open about that before my company really grew. It began to grow a lot in October of last year. So prior to October of last year, I had 800 followers on X, and everything I posted was basically like yelling into the void. Not everything, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but most of it was just like, you get a handful of likes, 4 or 5 likes, whatever kind of thing. And so it wasn't being seen by many people, but like a day or two after October 3rd, 2023, sorry, October 7th, 2023, I was posting about the vile
Mm.
terrorist attack carried out by Hamas against the people of Israel, and condemning that, right? So there were a number of statements or things I'd said or done that had made it very clear that I was not anti-Israel. But again, that was before I grew. So starting in October of last year, as my company began to grow a lot, and I started getting a lot more traction on X, go from 800 followers to 5,000, then 20,000. Now we're around 45,000. I just started seeing way more anti-Semitic comments, right? Just way more people, whether it was sort of veiled or
Mhm.
just very explicit, whether it be something that was comments on something I had posted, or things that people had put out elsewhere. And I remember thinking at some point, like, man, if I give these people pushback, it's going to be this big thing, like they're gonna it, I just knew it was going to be a big thing. They were going to create all this trouble,
Mhm.
and I knew that it was an issue. But I also thought, kind of, one of those things that you don't want to give the wrong people attention. Do you know
Yes.
what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
some people are out there and they just want attention. I really believe that part of the growth of some of this we can trace back to Hillary Clinton talking about the deplorables, the basket of deplorables in the alt-right. I'd never heard of the alt-right before Hillary Clinton said alt-right. And suddenly it's almost like she spoke it into existence. And I'm
Yes.
sure it really did exist to some extent, but it's like you give it all this attention and you equivocate it with your enemies, and suddenly a lot of your enemies are going to go, "Oh, we can she's calling it this, so we can be that." Um but but over time it got worse, and I saw more and more and more of it. Um, and then leading up, well, going back a little more, in May of last year, of this year, so a little bit a month before the the post that you just read a minute ago, um, I actually kind of hit my breaking point, and I came out with this post where I said, like, "Hey, just so you know, I don't hate Jews." Hitler, the Nazis were bad. The Holocaust did happen. Like, and if you disagree with that, we're going to have problems. That's sort of a summary of the post I made, and it got some traction. And I definitely lost some followers and took some heat, but at a scale way smaller than what you saw as a
Mhm.
result of my post from June 22nd. And and the reason I decided to broach this subject again, and perhaps with a little bit more fire and a little bit more pointedness that you saw in that post, was, if you recall, June 22nd, that was leading up to the U.S. involvement in the strikes against Iran as a result of their nuclear program.
Mhm.
And what I was starting to see, while I had seen tons of anti-Semitic content on X over those last 10 months or whatever, I saw just a dramatic increase over just a couple of weeks as the conversations around Iran were taking place. And a lot of it was really just baseless accusations about, like, Israel controls our government, and Israel, we no more wars for Israel. Like, no more wars for Israel. What wars have we fought for Israel? Is
Right.
like a first question there. Um, and talking about, like, Iran isn't a real enemy. Why is it okay for Israel to have nukes, but it's not okay for Iran to have nukes? Um, and again, just a lot of this pushback was mixed with anti-Semitism. There were some people who just did not want a conflict with Iran, and they were arguing in good faith. I think it's totally legitimate, right? I disagree with the perspective, but it's totally legitimate to kind of be more pacifistic in nature, right?
Yes.
It's totally legitimate to want to avoid unnecessary foreign entanglements, right? Unnecessary being the key word there. And so it's debatable whether something is necessary or not. But because of the overwhelming amount of anti Israel, anti Jewish, anti Semitic content related to this opposition to Iran, I wanted to speak up about that specifically. And part of my background is I worked in the intelligence community for close to a decade. I was in the Marine Corps. I deployed to Iraq. I've done a lot of work related to countering Iran directly. My dad was in the Marine Corps. My brother was in the Marine Corps. Cousins in the Army, Air Force, Navy, grandparents, great grandparents. My family has served in the United States military going back to the Revolutionary War. And I've had a very keen and deep appreciation for foreign affairs in the Middle East since I was a child, quite literally. My dad, one of his best friends, who he went to officer candidate school in the Marine Corps with, died in Beirut in 1983 when Iranian-backed Hezbollah bombed the Marine Corps barracks there. Right, so, like, I have not just sort of this head knowledge experience with all this. I have a deep, even personal sort of connection to the kind of damage that has been done to the United States by Iran over the decades. They're responsible for thousands of deaths of U.S. servicemen and women in Iraq and Afghanistan over the last couple decades as well. And so I knew that, hey, not only is anti-Semitism wrong on its face, regardless of what you're trying to leverage it for, but the position that Iran, or the U.S. potential strike against Iran, is just this war for Israel, is totally baseless. Iran is an
Mhm.
enemy of the United States. They have been since 1979. They've proven themselves at every turn, when possible, that they want to kill Americans. They want to destroy America. They chant death to America in their assembly, right? It was
Mhm.
comical when um, comical and sad, but when Tucker Carlson was interviewing the president of
Yes.
Iran, and he was saying, "Oh, death to America, that doesn't mean death to America." Like, what are you like? uh, it- Who is believing that? Who is watching that and going, "Oh, shoo, he said it. He said it doesn't mean that." Great, depends on what the definition of is, right? Um,
Mhm.
so I felt that it needed to be addressed very, very pointedly. And I think I don't want to jump ahead to your next question necessarily, but I think some of the controversy that came out of it is I was directly addressing specifically those people who were coming at the conversation from a Nazi, groyper, anti-Semitic
Yes.
place. But the response came from a bunch of people who were like, why are you calling everyone who opposes action in Iran Nazis?
Right.
Which is not what I said.
So a couple things. I took some notes on that was a lot there. Thank you. Just a couple things. One, you said you started to notice more anti-Semitic comments. Now, I have a portion of people who watch Deprogram who don't go on X. Some of them are Facebook people or they're just YouTube people, but they don't see a lot of what those of us who spend time on X have seen. And it has also been my experience that there's been a definite increase in just outright Jewish hatred, just nasty, vile stuff I never thought I would see on a major public gathering place. And and some of that I've also seen spill over into the real world with people I know getting pulled into this very tantalizing kind of scapegoating of Jewish people. Have you experienced that as well? Have you seen that spill over into the real world? Have you seen any real world implications yet, or is it mostly just online in your experience?
Good question. Not not personally. Like I don't have any friends, family members, or associates that I know of that I've seen that kind of sentiment from. Um, if something pops up that I think of later, maybe I'll mention it. But I I haven't seen it. It's been for me very exclusively online, which is
And
not to say that hasn't been personal as well. But yeah, it's been very very heavily online.
And do you think that it is, I sometimes get people when I talk about it, they're like, well, Keri, so some people say, well, it's all bots. And I'm like, well, obviously, I think part of it's bots, but some of these people are real people. Bots are effective. They use bots for a reason. It makes you think that this is a popular idea or movement.
Yeah.
As someone who worked in defense intelligence and in the military, do you think that there is, I mean, just your gut reaction on it, do you think part of this is manufactured?
Yeah. I mean, I'm like you, and like I think most people, I'm pretty certain that a portion of it is bots. I've done some light research on like the estimates of the number of bots on X, and those estimates range from anywhere from 5% of the monthly active users all the way up to like 50% of the monthly active users are bots. And so I think the sort of realistic happy medium might be 15 to 20% of the active users on X are bots. Again, an estimate. It could be lower, it could be higher, but you wouldn't be in the range of crazy to expect that it's somewhere around there. So we know there are bots. We know that there are entities who have a lot to gain or lose based on the sort of information battles that you see happening on X. Think about companies wanting to prop up their brands. Think about nations that wish to improve their standing, or perhaps degrade the standing of other nations. Right. Um, so leading up to the Iran conflict, or the bombs we dropped on their nuclear sites, obviously Iran did not want the U.S. involved in that. And if you have this like what's the logical argument we can use? Let's rely heavily on this sort of anti-Semitic
Mhm.
direction, which is already in keeping with their own values and beliefs. And it strategically, it also sort of degrades the long-term potential relationship between America and Israel, which is always, something that is very important for Iran and for some of their allies. Um, and then we saw a number of really prominent accounts that were deleted, or either they deleted them themselves, we're not sure, that ended up being people located in the Middle East, where
Yes.
there's this one Texas patriot, and I was seeing his content
Yes.
all over the place, and he ended up being in Pakistan, right?
Yeah. And
And
they all named themselves like, MAGA, Texas Patriot number
yes,
7.
yes, yes,
And his
like
name is like
brilliant.
mood needs to be Pakistan.
So we definitely know there are bots, but I've come to the sad conclusion that less of them are bots than I previously thought. And part of that is because every once in a while I would come into contact with someone that, there'd be enough information on them that I could look them up and find a real person like at the other end of it. And I had people that were also looking people up for me, be like, hey, this person, you sent me a death threat. Like, oh, like here they are, kind of thing. It's like, oh, they're a real person. Um, so I don't know what the numbers are, but I know that a lot of them are real people.
Mhm.
And what I also don't know, and the heart is deceptive above all things, right? And Proverbs talk about like the depth of the heart. Um, is it's the heart? It's like a well. It's so deep. How can any man see to the bottom of it? I don't know. Some of these people, I think, absolutely hate Jews to their core, um, and they're just livid about it, and they see red anytime the topic comes up. But some of them, I think, are trolls. They're people that don't think about the consequences of their statements, and they
Yeah.
see that this is taboo, right? It's like, oh, and it's edgy, and it's this thing I can do, and I'm earning street cred here online when I say these things. They don't necessarily have this really deep, metastasized hatred against Jewish people or the state of Israel, but they just they're just going to say it to be funny or to get likes or comments or whatever else. And I think that's also a percentage of the people out there. You know, I
Yeah.
I don't know.
I would agree with you. And, just a little about my background. I was in the woke left cult for about 20 years.
Um,
Came out of it, got pulled into it in college, came out of it around 2016, 2017. It was like a 2 or 3 year process leaving. It's like a cult. It's like leaving a cult. It takes a while. Um, and I think it's kind of similar to that sort of extremism on the left in that you have, um, you do have some very, just completely, heart and heart kind of people and with bad intentions who are in it and who can probably cannot be reached. But then you have a lot of sincere people who get pulled into it because I think that it preys upon your it gives feeds you a little bit of truth with a bunch of lies and some scapegoats. And then it tells you, you are uniquely oppressed and put upon and this is this sort of uh, seductive belief that if it's all the fault of these people and they need to be punished and then my group will rise to the top. Like it's very similar in that
yeah.
way. And
Yes.
some of those people who are sincerely in it because they think, this is righteous. I think those people, their minds can be changed. That's just my guess about it. But I wanted to ask you a quick question about something else you said earlier about how Clinton talked about the alt-right and the basket of deplorables, and it was making me think about how, again, these two extremism, kind of these two sides, two kinds of extremism. Would you say that she almost in a way that sometimes like the woke left like breathes this into existence?
Yeah. Yeah. And I, I, again, it's hard to know exactly how much it was out there, but um, I really just never heard of the alt right before that. And I'm someone who's very involved in politics, who has been very involved in politics for a long time. I actually ran for US Congress back in 2016 in the
Oh, wow.
Republican primary. Didn't win, of course, but
Wow.
it was
Good
a
for
bit of a
you.
windmill charge. Thank you. So that was fun. But yeah, I still believe that's true, but I also think that I was relying too heavily on that narrative for too long. Whether she spoke it into existence or not,
Mhm.
um, what it led me to believe is that the accusations of the woke right, of this that you typically hear from people on the left were baseless, right? That it was more kind of posturing by like similar to what Hillary Clinton did. And
Mhm.
so while I knew there were some anti-Semites out there, I thought they were just this very tiny, insignificant group that didn't
Yes.
really have influence and didn't really have any power and didn't um and also I would have questioned or outright denied their alignment with the right, you know. Um, but but what became more apparent to me over the last couple weeks as I started seeing the kinds of responses I was getting and seeing who some of them were coming from and who some of the silence was from and so on, um, I started to realize like, oh, this there is a component of this that is aligned with the right or is involved with
Yes.
the right or is in bed with the right or however you want to put it. I'm not going to say that it defines the right by any means or that it has ultimate power or authority over the right. Look at what happened. Ultimately, the United States bombed the nuclear sites in Iran. Like in that power struggle, the woke right did not win. you
Right.
know and so that's encouraging, that's good, but we could be 10 years out from that no longer being true. I mean,
Yes.
we could see, right, we see essentially a this Muslim communist guy who won the Democrat nomination for mayor in New York City. It We could be 10 years away from a Republican getting a prominent nomination who has sort of openly anti-Semitic positions, and not them coming out and saying that they hate Jews, but coming out and repeating a lot of this sort of cryptic kind of messaging and signaling about like, I just don't know why we need to be sending our troops to go die for Israel and things like that, and to sort of propagate these narratives that are simply not true.
Right. Or to outright say, the in the same way that politician you mentioned is openly, communist, some of them are now openly, the ones I've seen are now openly saying, we are not conservatives. Some of them are now openly saying, we are fascists, or fascism is the only answer to communism. I've seen that. And I prefer it. I prefer the ones who are honest. I like it when they say we're not conservatives. I'm like, thank you. That's
Yeah.
what we've been saying. but but you're right. It was shocking for me to hear you say we could be 10 years out from that, because a lot of times I ask people that question, do you think that this could have, currently, whatever it is that we're all kind of loosely calling the woke right, whether it's the white nationalist part or the anti-Semitic part or this sort of uh, red pilled, destroy the nuclear family, incel male type, Andrew Tate type. I don't know. I lump him in there too. Um,
Yeah.
People say, well, they don't have the power that the woke left has, and they don't have the political power that, they don't run everything, all the institutions the way the woke left does. And I agree, but I remember when the woke left didn't have that power
Yeah.
and how fast things change. So usually people don't put a number on it like you did. Like, I have no idea. I'm not saying it's going to be 10
Yeah.
years out, but I like to at least hear someone say, like, yeah, this, yes, acknowledge that that could happen if
I think if
things
we don't
could
take it
turn.
seriously, that
Yeah.
that very well could happen. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to, is the great thing. It doesn't have to. Um, there's a thing that people say, and not to like overly dramatize this, but it needs to be talked about. In places where genocides have happened, people often say afterwards, "We never thought it could happen here."
Mhm.
My dad was in Kenya shortly after sort of a smaller scale genocide occurred there. It was, I think, a few tens of thousands of people in a particular region. And they said, we didn't think it could happen here. And he's been to Rwanda. He's spoken to, virtually everyone in Rwanda has been impacted by their genocide. And people have said things like, we didn't think anything like that could happen here. Um, we are we are arrogant if we believe that it could never happen here.
Yeah.
We're human beings. We're capable of all kinds of evil, and Germans in the 1930s and 40s were not just some special breed of evil. The Pol Pot's genocide in Cambodia was not because the people under Pol Pot who facilitated that were some special kind of evil people. We're just people, right? We're all sinners and we're all capable of very great evil. And if the conditions are right, we can do it in such a fashion that it's organized, and that it's deadly and it's horrific. And then
Mm,
afterwards, we can all go, "How did this happen?" But the signs are there.
yes. Can I ask you? You mentioned at the beginning that you have a favorable view of Israel, and you kind
Yeah.
of had already put that out there. And it's funny in this climate that we're in now, because I do speak against uh, what is being called the woke right, the same way I do against the woke left. I mean, that's why I left the woke left. I don't want a authoritarian, identitarian, collectivist kind of evil belief system. I want Christianity. I'm like, why would I be like,
Amen.
okay, yeah, sure, let's do it. Let's do the racism thing, but this direction. Like,
Yeah.
no. I
Yeah.
left the woke left because it was racist, because it was dehumanizing and all these things. Anyway, so because I speak against that, a lot of times in my comments, I get told that I'm a Zionist, that I
Mhm.
shill for Israel, that I'm paid by Jews. I got put on some list with like Joel Berry and Konstantin Kisin and James Lindsay and others, where they said we're all Zionists and we all talk about the woke right. And I was like, well, this is a cool list, thank you,
Yeah.
but I don't actually know enough about Israel. I never talk about it because I don't know enough about it to have an
Yeah.
opinion. So I don't usually even interview people about it because I'm more interested in ideology, cultural stuff here in the States, and not so much about foreign affairs
Mhm.
or interventions. But can I ask you, since you have this experience and you have an opinion about it, one
Yeah.
thing I keep hearing is they tell me that it's a genocide that's happening right now,
Mhm.
and I think, based on my limited knowledge, they are misusing that word. I think their war is awful.
Yeah.
But what do you think about that use of the word
Yeah.
genocide?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so there's a couple things there. First, I'll kind of unpack my favorable view of Israel, and first and foremost, it's theological. I try to unpack my thoughts and beliefs, and think, like, why do I believe this, or what should I believe about this, and the very base level is like, what does the Bible say? And so first and foremost, you don't know much about Israel, but it's wrong to hate Jews for being Jewish, just because
Yes.
that's wrong to do with any particular ethnic group, right? Um, and that comes down to Genesis 1:27, which the Bible says that God made them male and female in His own image; He made them. That's the verse from which we derive the Imago Dei doctrine, the Image of God doctrine. What makes humans special is not our superior intellect or communication skills or opposable thumbs, or that we stand on two legs, or that we can make fire, or any of those things. It is that we're made in the image of God. All those other things are byproducts of that, right? But every single human being, regardless of their stage of development, their age, their ability, their income, their nationality, their ethnicity, whatever, um, is made in God's image and carries infinite value. And so we start there from a baseline. Jews have just as much value as any other person because they're image bearers, right? And the cool thing about this is, as a Christian, I recognize other Christians as brothers and sisters in Christ, as children of God,
Mhm.
in in a way that non-Christians are not my brothers and sisters in Christ, right? And so there's a differentiation there, but non-Christians are still made in the image of God. They still have infinite value, and that goes back to our earlier conversation of this is why we need to share the gospel with them, right? Because we value them the way God values them. But then from there, you stack on top of that, when it comes to Israel, that, hey, God chose the people of Israel through Abraham and his descendants biblically. You see in Genesis, it talks about, I'll bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. And that's Genesis 12:3. And Tucker Carlson had this whole exchange with Ted Cruz on it. And unfortunately, Ted Cruz wasn't he hadn't gone through and studied exactly where that came from and exactly how it all applied well. Um, but while he took a lot of flack for it, he has the right position. The God's, Paul says in Romans 11 that the promises of God are irrevocable. All right, it's very clear that the covenant that God made with Abraham was not salvific. If you actually read Genesis 15, where it talks about the specific covenant that God made with Abraham, a covenant for him and his descendants, which he would have understood to mean his literal physical descendants, right? That it was not a salvific covenant. Genesis 15:6 says that Abraham believed God and God credited it to him as righteousness, right? That's prior to the covenant. So just like every human in history who's been saved in terms of their relationship with God, it has been by grace from God through faith in God, which when Jesus came, we came to understand it's faith in the person of Jesus Christ, the second person of the Godhead, the Son of God. Um, so all that to say, without because we could have an hours long conversation on the difference between, say, what people call dispensationalism and covenant or reformed theology that
Hmm.
embraces supersessionism, this idea that there is no more special relationship God has with Israel, that the church superseded that or replaced that. Some call it replacement theology. I don't
That
adhere to that.
I've heard that the
Yeah,
church, and forgive me,
yeah.
I still get called a baby Christian. I came to Christ in a year or two after leaving woke, and what I've heard, if I get this wrong, they say that basically the church is the chosen people,
Yes,
right? Okay.
yes. And so, and man, this I'll talk about it more because it's a good thing for you and for your viewers to hear about. And just know that there are limitless resources that you can look at on this topic. You could spend hours and hours and hours, hundreds and hours or thousands of hours studying this and looking at the different perspectives on it. But what 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 people who adhere to supersessionism, or what some would call I like to use the terms that people agree with. A lot of people don't like the term replacement theology because they believe it's a more aggressive kind of description of what they believe. So we'll use supersessionism. The the people who adhere to that, what they would often say is essentially that, yeah, the church is God's chosen people, and that in Galatians it talks about those who believe are the spiritual seed of Abraham. Essentially, it's talking about that we have inherited through Christ as the seed of Abraham that designation of God's chosen people, or the true Israel, right? But the problem is the Bible does not explicitly say that. It never explicitly says that the people of Israel are not God's chosen people anymore, that he revokes his covenant with them, right? There's a lot of passages that people would point at to say that it indicates that, but that's never explicitly said. Also, the most plain and direct reading of the promises that God makes to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob, to Moses would indicate that he's talking about the literal people of Israel. We're talking about ethnic Jewish people. And that can get confusing too when we start throwing
Hmm.
around words like Israel and Jew, because in the modern sense, Israel is a nation, Jew is an ethnicity, and Judaism is a religion. And you could say any one of those words and be sort of referring to one or more of those different categories. But so when I say Jew, I mean ethnic descendants of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and so on, the
Hmm.
12 tribes of Israel. That's who God's covenant is with, right? And so when God told Abraham, I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you, I believe that to be a promise that has has persisted throughout time and exists today for all people groups as it relates to Israel. And so America has a vested interest in blessing Israel, in being kind to Israel, besides the fact that you have this very clear historical oppression where this one particular people group has been preyed upon and attacked, and many people have tried to destroy the Jews over time. Um, that out of our benevolent nature as a nation that cares about truth and justice, that hey, we should side with this group that so many people are against, baselessly, baselessly against. Um, so is that that's a little bit of the picture of the theological. I can move on beyond that unless you have more questions
Yeah,
about that.
that's good. So that's more of the theological, and then I was asking you specifically about the conflict that's happening,
Yeah,
after October 7th, the war in Gaza, and some of the stuff that I often hear in my comments, even though I'm not even talking about Israel, but
yes,
it's in my comments, and the word genocide. I don't like when people misuse words. It's part of
yeah,
what the woke cult does. Like
yes,
all cults, they try and control language. They control thought by controlling words. So they
yeah.
come up with new words like, toxic masculinity, or they have new
Microaggressions.
microaggressions, or they change the definition of existing words like
Yes,
racism and woman and harm and stuff. And so uh, it really stuck out to me as a red flag that I was like, wait a minute, I don't know if that
yeah,
is a genocide, what's
yeah,
happening. Not that
yeah,
it's not atrocious, that war's not awful,
yeah.
but what would your perspective be on that word?
I would say it's unequivocally not a genocide, for a whole host of reasons. One, let's start with, well, even go back before October 7th. If you've been following the sort of interactions between what people call the people of Palestine and the people of Israel going back decades and decades, it's this repeating pattern again and again and again of people in Gaza firing rockets into Israel, Israel responding, and everyone getting upset at Israel's response. It's like and the rockets are being fired at civilians, right? They're just indiscriminately fired at civilian targets. And every once in a while, you'll have attacks from Hezbollah based in Lebanon that happen too. Hezbollah, if you're not familiar with them, they're a terrorist organization that's on par with some nations' militaries. Like they have heavy, heavy equipment. So you've got Hamas in Gaza, then you've got Hezbollah, mostly based in Lebanon, and then you also have this longer history of the actual nation states around Israel attacking Israel. Like during the 6 Day War, for instance, Israel was attacked by all five of its surrounding neighbors at the same time, right? Like that you could again, it's talking about focusing in on things. We could spend hours and hours talking
Hmm.
about any one of these conflicts over the years. But October 7th, Gaza had received a lot of aid from a lot of different groups. They'd gotten money for um, like water pipelines and stuff, which they'd use to build tunnels to burrow into Israel and attack their neighbor unsuspectingly. On October 7th, something like, and it's been a while since I've looked into these numbers, so forgive me if I'm off, but I think it was somewhere around 1,000 Hamas fighters came into Israel. And indiscriminately attacked civilians. They attacked military targets as well, police, and so on. But if you've read the reports of what they did, it's horrific. And I don't know how like heavy or
Hmm.
graphic you want to get, but the scale of sexual assault that occurred in Israel during that attack, and then back in Gaza with victims that they took back, is just horrific. I mean, it is
Hmm.
heartbreaking. I remember that morning well when I woke up and saw what had happened and was probably still ongoing, and saw this one particular clip of a young lady. She'd been brought into Gaza, and she was being pulled out of the trunk of this Jeep and put in the back seat, and she was wearing sweatpants. Her Achilles heels had been slashed, so she couldn't run off, and the back of her sweatpants appeared to be all bloodied. Like, and it was heartbreaking to see. And what's more is later that morning we went to a children's play being put on by some friends of ours, and I was in tears the whole time I was watching, because I'm thinking about these kids that I'm seeing in this play, and I'm thinking about what is happening to these young men and young women in Israel. Um, and and it was really horrific and horrifying. That in and of itself is enough for basis for war. And the fact that as these fighters were coming back into Gaza, the people were on the streets celebrating, and not just celebrating these fighters returning, but they're bringing live
Hostages.
and dead prisoners, and the people are screaming in jubilation, and they're trying to hit them whether they're dead or alive. Some of the Gazan civilians went over the border, because some of the borders were opened into Israel, to get loot and to participate in the some of the attacks and come back. And so you have obviously the bodies of victims from the October 7th attack, but then you have hostages. And some of those hostages are still being held today. And so the very reasonable stance of anyone on this issue is, hey, if you don't want Israel to attack you, then release all the remaining hostages. Like, that would be the baseline, easy, we end the attacks today, but they won't do that. They will not do that. They would rather continue to see their people shot at and bombed and starved and so on than give up these Israeli hostages. And they know that that's going to be the result. They absolutely know it. And furthermore, when it comes to military practices, the Israeli military is it's the most humane, and I would argue, like, too patient of all militaries in the world. They do something I don't know of any other military in the world that does this, but oftentimes before they blow up a building, they'll do what's called a hard knock. They'll launch a mortar round, or they'll drop a piece of ordnance from an aircraft or an artillery piece or whatever that's inert. It does not have an explosive in it. So it hits the building, like they may have even announced ahead of time, like, hey, if you're in this building, you need to get out. Then they'll hit it with a piece of inert ordnance to show how seriously, like, we're about to blow up this building. If you're in there, get out. I've never heard of any other military doing that.
Yeah, giving you a heads up.
Yeah.
I heard about that, about the announcements where they say, hey.
I wouldn't do that. I would tell them not to do that. I would tell them, hey, you want to kill the people. If this building is a legitimate target, you want to kill everyone in there. And yeah, there could be civilians in there, but, like, you don't want to give the bad guys a chance to escape. Like, that's part of it. But they do those kinds of things. And so, yeah, there have been many situations where many civilians have been killed, but we know that they purposefully put civilians in the line of fire. We also know that they purposefully create false reporting through, they'll set up these whole elaborate scenes where they're using fake blood and all kinds of things. And it's been caught over and over and over and over again. They put their military bases in the basements of hospitals and schools. Like, they do all of these things. And so for anyone to say that what's going on there is a genocide, it's not being spoken in good faith at all. This is a terrorist group that their influence has metastasized into the society around them. And unfortunately, Gaza is a terrorist state. That's the best way to put it. It is a terrorist state. And so if you've chosen as a people to be a terrorist state, to attack your neighbors when they're sleeping, and to rape them and to take them hostage and to just kill them indiscriminately, then, like, frankly, the debauchery and evil that occurred on October 7th is as bad or worse as anything that happened in Sodom and Gomorrah when Lot had his visitors there. And so if Gaza is not wiped off the face of the planet by the mighty hand of God, then they'll have received mercy. I'll put it that way.
They will have received mercy. I appreciate you going through this with me. It's not something I've talked about with guests before, as I mentioned. And I have a lot of, Israel and Gaza 101 kind of questions, or for dummies kind of questions. So I just have one more. I don't want to belabor this part of the interview, but since you were willing to talk about that, the accusation that it's a genocide, one of the other accusations I've heard that I believed at first until I saw footage that seemed to contradict it. But then I have friends who telling me the footage is not real. The accusation is that it was a concentration camp, that it was like Gaza before this war started, before October 7th, that they said it was like an open air concentration camp, and that, the people were basically being oppressed by Israel, the people there, that, we need to free Palestine, and that, they were retaliating based on how Israel has oppressed them. But then I saw a lot of footage of restaurants, bars, karaoke, hotel, like glamorous hotels, and Instagram videos and stuff where it just seemed like a normal Middle Eastern city, not like this concentration camp I had been led to believe.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's not an open air concentration. It wasn't an open air concentration at all. concentration camp at all by any means. A lot of people will talk about the population density of Gaza, right? It's no more populous in terms of density than any major city in the world. You know, you look at Paris, you look at New York, you look at Los Angeles, you look at Tokyo, Mexico City, Chicago, Dallas. Gaza is not like it has some super high population density. It's much less densely populated than a lot of places. But additionally, yeah, it wasn't a concentration camp by any means. You know, people were free to go in and out. Um, the, there's a really interesting, man, there's so many billions of dollars of aid has poured into Gaza over the years, like billions and billions and billions. And what they do is they use that money to build rockets and to
Mhm.
build tunnels, right? And then they attack Israel with it, and then the response occurs, and they go like, "Ah, this is terrible. How could this happen to us?" Um, yeah, to call it a concentration camp is silly and sad. But also, here's another thing that people forget: Gaza borders Egypt, right? Egypt does not want the Palestinians there. You know, prior to being essentially Palestine, the Gaza and the West Bank belonged to other nations in the region around them. And rather than taking their people back or making space for their people or helping their people, they have essentially walled them off. Like, no, you can't come in here. No other Middle Eastern nation wants Palestinians. None. But they do want to wipe Israel off the map and make it one big Palestine. So you've got this region that is all of these Islamic nations, right? It's Israel is the one non-Islamic nation, and it's a Jewish nation right there in the heart of the Middle East. And rather than saying, you know, okay, these guys are our Muslim brothers, we should take them in, we should help them, you know, instead of all these nations doing that, they're like, no, 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 we're going to keep those people there as a scourge against Israel. And also, we don't want to take them in because we don't like them because they cause trouble. Like, that's part of it. There, a lot of times when Palestinians come into places like Egypt, they do cause political trouble and so on. So yeah, there has been historically high unemployment in Gaza, but that's due to, hey, if you run your society a certain way, it's going to have high unemployment. The people of Gaza have the ability to create businesses and do jobs and create jobs and take those billions and billions of dollars in aid money and use it to, you know, revitalize their economy, and they don't do it. And then here you have Israel that's essentially got hostile neighbors surrounding them, has had for decades and decades. They basically were pushed right into war at the very genesis of the modern state of Israel, and yet they're thriving. They're one of the most successful economies in the world for their size.
And weren't they also allowing prior to October 7th, like a lot of people from Gaza would like go into Israel to work
Yes,
and have careers and okay.
tons.
I appreciate you clearing some of this up for me or
Yeah,
shedding some light on it for us. I do want to get back to the US and the growing kind of what is being referred to as woke right, anti-Semitic, or white nationalist kind of ideology. When you made these posts that we mentioned before, um, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't I see one of your tweets said something to the effect of, I might be confusing you with someone else. So, but I thought I saw one that said you were basically sort of apologizing that it took you this long to say something. Was that
yeah.
you?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
that was me. That was me. And you know, I mentioned earlier there were things I had said in the past. Like, so this one post you read earlier was from June, and I had made a post back in May, and then
Mhm.
back before my company began to grow prior to October of last year, I'd said some other things before. But there was a period where I was sort of silent. I was totally silent in the face of what I was seeing. And I even even though I could make excuses for that, like I what I won't make excuses for is that I was being passive and silent in the face of what I knew to be wrong. And so I wanted to confess that and repent before God to that, and encourage others if they're feeling the same way not to do the same. Which is one of the like
Mhm.
my goal is not to just burn to the ground everyone who has a differing perspective from me on this. I know there are a lot of people that are reachable,
Yes.
and I know, and at the most accessible people are people who don't hate Jews at all and aren't saying anything bad about Israel or the Jews or whatever, but are afraid to speak up because of the negative feedback that they believe they'll receive. And I'm not a guy that sugarcoats things. I'm here to tell you, you could get some really negative feedback. I did. Like I that whole week was intense. I got by the end of the week, I had it was like 22,000 comments or replies on my content alone. It was something like 11 million views or impressions on my posts. And that was just the stuff that I could see through my content, because I know there were a lot of other people posting about me. Um,
Hmm.
and so who knows how many other potential views or comments were going on outside of my own content. And I, I've had a video of myself talking about abolishing abortion in Texas go viral before. It got like 1 million views, and it got picked up by the Texas Democrat Party, and their post got 1 million views. And then Gavin Newsom posted about it. The DNC chair posted about it. Like, it went viral in the true sense of the word. Um, and the hate that I received that week when I took a hard stance against anti-Semitism was at least 10 times greater than anything I
Wow.
experienced. Maybe I might even say 100 times greater. It was
Wow.
eye-opening. It was surprising. It was, and I would not have expected that to be the case. I kind of thought I'd seen everything, I hadn't.
Isn't that incredible? It's you know what it is? It's because so many of, I think anyway, what we're loosely calling woke right, they do see themselves as being on the right, even though some of them come out and say we're not conservatives, we are fascists, or we are this, but they see themselves as being on the right, and they view you as an apostate. And
Yeah.
and that's sort of like when I left the woke left, when people I know who left the woke left, the fury and the anger and the vitriol was a lot greater than anything I had gotten from conservatives when I was in the woke left. And it was greater than if it were a conservative criticizing them, because they view you as like leaving their faith, like
Yeah.
you're not one of us. Okay, and you do great damage because, I mean, look at you. You're an upright, respectable entrepreneur, business Christian father and husband, and you have this based company. You're not afraid to proudly proclaim your faith in Jesus Christ. And so for you to say, no, this isn't cool, this isn't Christian, it's not conservative, and we don't want this, like, that does a lot more damage than any criticism from a leftist. Like, who cares what a leftist
Yeah.
thinks?
Yes. Who
Right.
cares? Yeah. They'll say anything. They'll say
Yeah.
anything. It's like,
Yeah.
just forget about it. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But man, they were screeching. So that's what I was going to ask you about. Well, so many things here. Okay, so first of all, you said you apologize for not saying anything up until that point because you were thinking about the people who don't have these views but are afraid to speak. And that right there is something I noticed when you said that, because that was similar to the climate when I first started trying to walk away from the woke left. And a lot of people I know who left back before it became easier to do so, back before you could have a career doing this, like talking, whatever.
Yeah.
When you really got like in 2017, when I did say, hey, let me try to explain what's happening, guys, um, people were so afraid, and they were afraid of the consequences of it. And you still have that where people are afraid to speak against the woke left, but it's not as dangerous and scary as it used to be. And so I see something similar happening with this in the way that you phrase that, where there are people who are afraid to say something that should be easy to say, like, hey, Nazis are bad, guys, like,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
like,
Yes.
and so I just love that you recognize that, and you were like, I have to apologize for my cowardice. I had to do that when I left the woke left, Paul.
Yeah.
I had to apologize to certain people who I stayed quiet when I saw them being mobbed, and I was like,
Yeah.
"This is wrong," but I didn't say anything, because I was
Yeah.
afraid. Um, I was a coward, for a while. So I just love it. That's not a question. That's just me saying I love it.
Thank you.
And uh, what was you kind of got into this, but the response.
Hmm.
What were some of the fallout? It's not just that you got all this hate mail and you realized it was a much bigger problem maybe than you realized.
Yeah.
But what was some of the specific kind of stuff that you had to deal with after making
Yeah.
this post?
Yeah. So, a lot of people, yeah, obviously tons of negative comments, direct messages, death threats. I don't know how many death threats, honestly, but like I tried not to like take too much stock of them in my mind and
Yeah,
dwell on them too much. That my belief about those people is, hey, if you're not willing to say things with your name and a picture of your face next to them, then you know like what are you really going to do? Like
yeah,
you can't even stand up to your own words in public. um
yeah.
so but but yeah, a lot of people unfollowed me. I think total of like, last I checked, there's like 7 or 8 thousand unfollows over the course of about a week. And but I got like 7,500. So I think it was like 8,000 people unfollowed me, 7,500 people followed me in the same time period.
Mm,
So, it was a net loss of like 500 followers or something like that. Um, a lot of people blocked me. A lot of people, the more prominent and larger an account is, the less drastic their action are going to be. So some of the biggest accounts were not necessarily the ones attacking me, but I noticed a number of bigger accounts that unfollowed me, that had
yeah.
previously followed me, or maybe a couple that blocked me or whatever. I had a few interactions with a few folks who ran bigger accounts as well. Um,
Who
Jake
are pushing this kind of stuff?
Yeah, like Jake Shields
Ah,
commented on one of my things the other day. I can't remember. It's hard to remember if that was like just a few days ago or a few weeks ago.
mhm.
It all blends together. But he's got a big following, like 800 something thousand people, whatever. So he's obviously very comfortable with being very open about his stance on that. Um, but it was somewhat isolating a little bit, but I also had a lot of people who are reaching out and encouraging me. Some people who I know, and then a lot of strangers too.
Mhm.
I had probably hundreds of messages from from Jewish people, whether they're Jewish Christians or um, Jews who embrace Judaism or secular Jews, whatever, who were just like, "Thank you for speaking up for this," and that meant the world to me. They cared and they wanted to express their appreciation, and I'll always remember that. I'll always remember the people who came to my side, and whether it was publicly or in the DMs or whatever, just saying like, "Hey man, keep going. You're doing the right thing." Um, I appreciated it a lot. It was very, very encouraging.
Um, Jake Shields, since you did name, I was wondering if you were going to name any of the larger kind of woke right accounts pushing this stuff. Um, since you did name him, I'll just say for people who follow Deprogrammed, I don't name a whole lot of names because I don't want it to be about those particular people. But for the ones who I think are most obvious and some of the worst, I have named, and he's the worst of the worst. He's on my wall of the worst.
Mm, yeah.
So that guy, I think a lot of these. Do you think a lot of these people took a turn? When you mentioned earlier that back when Hillary Clinton said something about basket of deplorables, and back then you thought it was just this very fringe group of people, and maybe they didn't even have a lot of associations with the right, and you're realizing in the past few weeks that's not the case. Um, do you? I get the sense that it changed, and that this sprung up, that a lot of these people maybe didn't even hold these kind of views
Yeah.
back when Clinton was running. Do you think that it's grown? Like people like
Yeah.
Shields, he got a following, not based off of saying anti-Semitic, racist, crazy things, but based, from what I understand, he was opposing authoritarian COVID policy, which I agreed with. I followed him because of that. and
Yeah.
then suddenly it seemed like this started growing.
Yeah.
Do you think it
Yeah.
grew?
I've talked about this and on some other platforms, but I think it's important. I think and I believe that my theory is accurate, or I wouldn't be talking about it. But what I think happened is, you know, the established institutions have lost trust, at scale, largely. And there's a lot of things that led to that. COVID led to that a lot, right? COVID was horribly mishandled by not only the government, but just a lot of institutions, schools, businesses, the medical community, and so on. Um, and and but then you have X that came on the scene, and Elon Musk bought Twitter and converted it to X, and it went from this very locked down, censored kind of platform to this place where you could say anything. And there's a lot of value in that. I mean, this has been one of the most major disruptions in communication in a way that impacts the balance of power since, I would say, the Gutenberg press. One of the
Mm,
things I've talked about before is like the one of the reasons that the Protestant Reformation occurred when it did was because of the Gutenberg press, right? When Martin Luther posted his 95 Theses, his arguments against the Catholic Church, it took about a year, over a year, for the Catholic Church to respond publicly. So you have the announcement, people read that, they eventually take it down to Rome, they think about that, they talk about it, they send people back, and then they send out their proclamation like, hey, we condemn this, we disagree with this. Well, in that time, his announcement had been copied and reprinted and spread all over Western Europe, right? In a year. There was a time it was very difficult for news, particularly complex information like what he posted, to travel so effectively and so quickly. And so by the time the Catholic Church denounces it, there's a lot of people who already agree with it,
mm,
right? They weren't able to kind of nip it in the bud. And you see similar things with like trying to this Epstein stuff has blown up considerably in the last week or so. But going back when Pam Bondi was saying like, "Oh, it's on my desk," and it's going to be a big reveal, and then it was a big nothing burger, right?
yeah.
The government, the administration, kind of tried to gaslight everyone on it, and that was
Yes.
when Elon Musk was still in the administration. He owns the platform. He's in the administration. Even he tried to say a few positive things about Pam Bondi. You could tell his heart wasn't really in it, but is like he was gonna just do it for the team. And yet they couldn't silence the dissent of the people against that. That means there's been a shift. The established institutions no longer hold power over the narrative in the way that they once did. And so to kind of get to the point directly,
Mhm.
people have not only lost trust in established institutions, but they've also lost trust in established narratives, right? And we are no longer in a world where knowledge kind of reigns supreme, at least in the way that people interact with the world around them. We all have smartphones. So people think, I don't need to know anything. I can just Google it. And obviously that's wrong and super dangerous and ultimately kind of foolish. Um, but it means that people don't build these really complex but well-informed narratives in their heads based on the reality of the world around them and the history that has occurred up to that point. You just say, what does this say?
Mm,
Right? And so and you used to be able to trust established institutions, at least to some extent, to at least give you some basic foundational truth about things. But those crumble and the established narratives crumble, and then everything is up for grabs. And here you have these also well established anti-Semitic, we'll say, like, covens that have been operating in the dark for decades. They've been marginalized, they've been on the sidelines, but you know what they've been doing? They've been building and crafting narratives. They've been
yes.
doing research, fake research. It's not good scholarship, but they find newspaper article clippings that they feel feeds into that narrative. They create questions, and they've gone through the work of having conversations with each other and with other groups around this topic, such that they built up a body of work to help craft a narrative around anti-Semitism about, questioning the Holocaust and talking about Jewish control of our government and historic control of Jews and banks and on and on and on. And you've got all these people questioning and not sure what to believe is true. And suddenly these people slide in and be like, hey, listen, you want to know the truth? I got the truth about everything. And it's right here. And it's really simple. It's all the Jews. Really easy answer to all your questions, all your problems. It's the Jews. That is the direction that they take it. And because people lack the knowledge to contest it, they don't have it. If you tell me that the Holocaust didn't happen, I'm like, that's absurd. It's one of the most historically documented events in history. But if you tell someone that who doesn't know history and doesn't understand how history is written and by whom and when and where and why and all those things, well, then it's like, oh, is it? I mean, they told us all these lies about COVID. So why couldn't they have also told us all these lies about the Holocaust?
Yes. Oh, that was excellent. Such a great point, and it reminds me of when you said, like, if somebody tells me the Holocaust didn't happen, they've been doing, as you said, decades of this narrative crafting in a coven. I like the way you call it, a coven, where in trying to create this alternative narrative that those of us who live in reality didn't know we were going to have to do all of this work to even prove that or disprove that. It's sort of like on the woke left when suddenly they spent all this time crafting in academia this narrative that men can become women, that biological sex isn't real. And the first time you start to encounter that and people are legitimately saying this to you like it's true, like, oh no, biological sex is a social construct. And you're like, wait, what? I have to defend biology? Wait, like, this is just absurd.
Yes.
Like, I'm not, I didn't know we were going to have to do this. Like, okay.
Yes.
It's like saying, gravity's not real. And you're like, wait, what? I got to go figure out how to defend this now. And
Yes.
so what a great way of putting it. They've spent all this time crafting narratives, and now it's sort of some of that's being brought out into the sunlight, and hey, it's time to disinfect it. It's time to have to learn how to explain biological sex and reality and the Holocaust and history. Hey, I'm gonna wrap it up here because you've been so generous with your time already. I just wanted to ask you, I guess, like a final question. If just a word that you would like to leave people with. I think a lot of people might be feeling demoralized if they can see the kind of if they have eyes to see the kind of stuff we're talking about. Like, hey, we just have spent all these years fighting the woke, and now there's this ideology on the right rising up that's threatening to splinter or at least prey upon conservatives. If they're feeling demoralized, like, what's a word that you would leave people with? Some thoughts you would leave people with, and then tell people where they can find you. You guys, the links are below. Also, it's wassonwatch.com, but where else they can find you?
Yeah, sure. I think it's Proverbs 18:10 says, "The strength of the Lord is a strong tower; the righteous run into it, and they are saved." And one of the things that passage makes me think about is in First Samuel. I believe it's chapter 30, and look that up. And I could be totally wrong about that. But David, he was King David prior to being king. He was leading this band of men, of fighters that he'd collected over time, and they were in this weird in between place. They were fleeing from Saul, and they went to go work for the Philistines, which is nuts. But they're working for the Philistines, and he and his people lived in this little town called Ziklag, and they'd gone out to go to a fight, and they got sent back. The Philistine commander said, "Hey, we don't want you guys to be in this battle, so you go head back." They go back. They're heading back to Ziklag, and in the distance, they see smoke rising from their town, right? And they get there, and their town has been attacked by foreign invaders. It's been burned by fire. Their wives and children have been taken away, along with all their stuff and all their livestock. Like, this is a really bad day. If you can kind of put yourself in that mindset of like what it would have felt like to come back to that. And then David's men turn on him and they want to stone him. Like, they're blaming him for this.
Mm.
So not only is David's wife and children have been taken away by foreign invaders. His stuff has been taken, his town has been burned, but also his men's wives and children and their stuff has been taken, which already feels bad. And now they're talking about stoning him. And
Wow.
like, if I can imagine the worst point in someone's life, like, that's maybe a worse experience than most people have ever experienced, like, that's a really bad day. That's a really bad moment. That's the depths of despair kind of a moment. And what it says is that David strengthened himself in the Lord. It's just
Mm.
very simple, direct line. David strengthened himself and the Lord. And what he did after that was, because David was a warrior and he was a brave man. He was a competent warrior. He was a competent leader. He was favored by God, more importantly. Um, he didn't just spring into action and go and say, all right, guys, we're going to chase after them. We're going to go get our families back. The next thing he did is he consulted God. He prayed and he asked God, "Hey, should I pursue the enemy or not?" And the response that he got is, "You should pursue." So he didn't just strengthen himself in God; he relied on God. He sought God's counsel. He sought God's wisdom in the moment. In a moment that to us, like, yeah, assuming you're not afraid, which if you're a warrior, like, fear is not going to be what's holding you back, probably, then you're just going to spring right into action and do it. And so what I would say to people in this time is like, strengthen yourself in the Lord. The strength of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run into it and they are saved. Like, we do not have control over the world around us. We don't really have control over our own lives and our own circumstances. God is the one in control. He is all powerful and he is good. And we can rely on the goodness of God in all circumstances. And that doesn't mean things are going to go the way we want them to or the way that we expect them to. It means that God's plan is superior to any and all plans, and we can trust in him. So people should be in prayer. People should be diving into the word and their Bibles. They should be going to church. If they don't know God, they should be seeking God. They should be
Hmm.
learning about God. But if they do know God, like, put all your eggs in that basket, because it works out. And it's
Yes.
my prayer for our nation. Like, I want good things for America. It's my prayer for our nation that is a nation that we repent, that we reform, that we abolish abortion, that we cast anti-Semitism to the side and it doesn't become something that's socially acceptable. And all these other good things for us. That's going to happen by the strength of the Lord. If that happens, if God decides to bless us with those improvements, it'll be through him. So let's remember that and strengthen ourselves in the Lord.
Amen. Thank you for that. Paul, thank you for being here with us on Deprogrammed. Your website is wassonwatch.com. And where else can people find you?
Follow me at Wasson Watch on X. Also same username on Instagram and Facebook and stuff. But if you're on X, like, that's where I'm at. That's where almost all my content is posted. That's where I'm responding to people and very, very heavily involved. So if you're on X and haven't followed me there yet, definitely do that. We'll have a great time.
He's a great follow. Go and follow him. Thank you so much, Paul.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
Keri. You too.